This episode of Gabbing with Gabby is brought to you by the Breeders Direct Seed Company. In my opinion, the Breeders Direct Seed Company is your premier source for clones and seeds, and they are the only place that you can get the Gabby Staten Island collection. So visit Breeders Direct for all your seed and clone needs.
What's up, everybody? This is Gabby Staten Island with another episode of Your Weed Stories. This week, we've got our special guest, Boston Bob. Before we start, I just want to say a couple of words. We're recording this on New Year's Eve, and I had gotten a message from Bob that he wanted, or that he enjoyed the show, and that if we wanted to have him on the show, that he'd love to do it. And when I asked him a little background about himself, and I'm going to read this, he says, "I'm a hobby breeder. I release seeds through FCP with all proceeds going to Peter for the good work he does. Been doing podcasts for a couple of years. Main focus is on projects and methodology I tried to share for small growers." He also said, "I smoked in the 70s, hint at my age. My first IG account closed 2 years ago with 900 pics and 15,000 followers." And so the first thing I thought to myself was, this is great because I've been having some major players on the show, like Kevin Jodry and Michael Wolf-Siegel, who I think is super important. And I wanted to try to have some smaller, more, I would say, regular people doing the show. So we agreed and we scheduled it. Then yesterday I called Bob up, just to talk a little bit before the podcast today. And I didn't want to get too much information, because I like to be surprised when I do the podcasts. I like my reactions to be genuine. I don't want him to retell a story. But he did start to tell me a few things. And I have to say, I was just blown away. And while Bob may not be as well known as Kevin Jodry or some of the other people that we're going to interview on this podcast, he seems like an amazing person with a compelling story. And so I know you guys are going to enjoy it. Bob is a professional, and he does not sell cannabis. Everything that he grows, he gives away. And because he's a professional, he wants to stay anonymous. So we are not going to show Bob's face on this podcast. Unfortunately for you guys, you're going to have to look at my ugly mug this entire show. So if you're wondering why you can't see Bob, that's why. And with that, Boston Bob, tell us your weed story.
First of all, thank you for a nice introduction. And a pleasure to be on the show with you today, Gabby. So where do I start? I
would like you to start with your first cannabis experiences, when you first started smoking, when you first started growing, funny stories about your past and cannabis. And then, we can work towards the cool things you're doing today with breeding. And, I don't want to give up too much.
Yeah, and then we'll get into males, because I liked how we started and stopped that conversation.
Yeah, the conversation will weave in and out wherever you want.
So I guess the very beginning, I not probably, because I know I did. I smoked weed in 1970. So I was in 7th grade. I was in private school, and it was more a school for wealthy delinquents. So, and my parents didn't have money, so my grandparents paid, and I got sent to private school, and I smoked weed in seventh grade. And actually, I got caught. I got suspended. I told my mother it's the first time I ever smoked pot, and I can't believe I got caught the first time. Uh, I went back to that school, and then in eighth grade, I got caught again with four other people. They let the other four people back into school, and I got kicked out permanently. And I told my mother, I can't believe only the second time I smoked pot, I got caught again. So I'm thinking she probably didn't believe it, but I was a
Was it
kid.
true?
No, absolutely not. I was smoking weed all the time. Uh, it was a very early introduction. So, and back in those days, we weren't even getting really brickweed. Um, we got Panama Red and Acapulco Gold. Those were probably the two main strains, or they didn't even have names for strains back then, but we were smoking Panama Red and Acapulco Gold. On occasion, if stuff was really dry, you'd get some brickweed, but brickweed for me didn't come till later. So we always smoked pretty good weed. And back in the day, uh, at least on the East Coast, it was called a lid. And it was either four-finger lid or a five-finger lid. And for me, it was $15 because it was Panama Red. And that's what we smoked. So that was the beginning for me. Um, and then, going through high school and that kind of stuff, and then out of high school and into my 20s, I, I think for a while I was a pretty good wake and baker. Um, yeah, it, I, I think another turning point was, I think I was a sophomore in high school, so that would have been about 74. I bought my first pound. It was Mexican brick. I paid $90 for the pound. So um, that was my early adventures as a young age, and I smoked quite a bit. And then, frankly, in my mid-20s, I kind of got out of it, and I was out of the game for 25 years. Um,
You stopped smoking cannabis for 25 years?
I smoked a couple times a year. That was it. But
Hmm.
I literally went from, I'd smoke in bed before I got out of bed. And then in my mid-20s, it was, I had different focuses, and I just kind of gradually stopped smoking weed. And back in, when I was in high school, I had some plants in a closet. Who knows if I even knew what 1212 meant back then. But I was trying to grow weed, and I grew it in my basement closet in my mother's house.
What year
Uh,
was this, approximately?
oh, 74 and 75.
And what were you using for light?
Oh, just a fluorescent, just a lamp, just
Hmm.
just a lamp hung upside down in the closet, keep it on. I mean, I honestly, I don't even remember smoking any of it. I just remember trying to grow it, get it in the closet, um, because there was always seeds, right?
Hmm.
Any weed you got had seeds in it. I think the other thing that I remember, and I remember this very distinctly because it was probably 1971 or 72, I smoked my first Sinsemilla. Didn't have a name. The only thing that today that I can think of that looks like it is like Fruity Pebbles. Like it looked like Fruity Pebbles. All the other stuff was, Panama Red was dark green with a little bit of red hint. The Acapulco Gold was, green gold weed. It was always pretty consistent in terms of the color through the whole bag. And then somebody got this weed, and all we called it, it was just called Sinsemilla at the time, and it was had some reds in it, it had a little bit of yellows and greens. I mean, it was a really good looking weed. It was very upweed. It wasn't indica. So, worst case, it was a sativa hybrid back then. And the only thing we knew was it came from the Pacific Northwest. So that was the first time I ever smoked Sinsemilla. Had obviously no seeds in it. The weed was unbelievable. I still remember it today. Uh, yeah, it was really, really nice. And that was either the end of 71 or the beginning of 72. So that was a big change for me. So then I guess my real reintroduction was probably 10 years ago, 2014, 2015. I was out in Denver. I forget the name of the dispensary, but I bought a strain called Cindy White, and it was unbelievable weed. Just absolutely loved it. Up, happy, high, clear. And it made me realize that I could grow weed and make weed in any direction I wanted because of the different stuff out there. So that's when I kind of dove back in. So it's probably been 10 years, almost 10 years. Um, and then I just started collecting. I just, I did a bunch of Emerald Cups and met a whole bunch of people, did Instagram, um, and really just started collecting and building a library, right? So honestly, I probably have 300 strains. And what I do is if I'm doing breeding or I'm doing a project, they all revolve around a line or two lines I want to bring together. So I've got this huge library. And then in addition, I don't do a ton of seeds anymore unless I'm doing some kind of hunt. Because somebody else will have done the work and picked a really good cultivar. So I can use a cut of that cultivar, which we can talk about a little later on from different people out in the, in the community. So somebody else has done that work, and I've done that myself. I've got a few strains where, I find a really, really good plant, and I've passed the plant out to a couple people. Like you mentioned before, I don't sell anything, so I don't put any restrictions on it. People can do whatever they want with it. Good plant's a good plant, and I wouldn't have been able to do some of the stuff I've done if people didn't give me good plants. So I try to keep that circle going. Um, I, an interesting story. So it's got to be at least 5 or 6 years ago. I'm on Instagram. I've got, 15,000 followers, a bunch of kids, a bunch of, it was a, it's a good amount of following, but that was not my intent. Like I mentioned to you the other day, Instagram is my notebook, right? I'm getting older and it's easier to forget. So instead of my notepads, and in addition to my notepads where I'm keeping track of everything and writing everything down, when I do something, I post it on Instagram. So it's a lot easier than digging through notebooks. I just flip back through the pictures and I'm like, okay, I did this then. This went in flower then. This is how many days I have left. So I like Instagram because it's like my video notebook, or, actually it is. It's my video notebook. But so I sent you one picture of the plant in a basement. It's the last one I sent. It said, I think, tree number one, or basically it's an almost 8-foot plant. And that plant is PR1, Panama Red. So what happened?
And is that a male or is it a female?
Yeah, that's a male.
Oh my God. Yeah.
We were joking. I posted it when I opened my new Instagram account a year or two ago. I put that as one of the first pictures. But what happened it won't be too long, but I was at the Emerald Cup in 2016 and spent a bunch of time with John at Snow High Seeds. And Snow's always had some really good landrace stuff, right? He likes the esoteric, long flowering. So, we hung out for a pretty good amount. Really enjoyed talking to him. We've done a couple things back and forth since then. But what he did was he gave me a bud of Panama Red. And on the bud, it ended up, I think there were almost 40 seeds. So we did one grow, and it was good. I mean, it wasn't special, but it was good. And then we did another grow, and I picked a male, which was Panama Red 4, just, notes for myself so that I know what I'm doing. We separate the males and we start growing out the females. And literally 3 weeks into flower, where everything should be showing and the pistils are coming and it's, 3 weeks is pretty good to have in flower. We looked at one of the plants and it was a male. So the entire time, the male never showed anything. And then finally, around the 3rd week in flower, we realized there's a male in the room. And it was an absolutely beautiful plant. Thought it was going to be a great girl. So what I did is I junked the original male that I'd selected and took him and put him in that cellar. And that's the picture you have of that male. And that male literally was probably 4.5, 5 feet tall. And if you look at the plant, the top 2 feet of the plant, there's barely any leaves. It's just straight flower. I mean, it pushed out flowers like you can't believe. I mean, we were joking around. When we collected pollen, we collected on a full-length mirror. Like the mirror had to be 5 feet long, right? I mean, it was unbelievable. All you had to do was just take the mirror near the plant and shake the plant. I mean, I was joking around at the time that we were collecting pollen with a shovel. I mean, and I probably bred that plant over the next 4 or 5 years, at least a dozen times.
So something about that plant is, it's the photo that we have is, it's not the best photo, and it's on Instagram, and you sent a screenshot of it, but it looks like a Christmas tree. So like, often people will talk about like, a female plant that looks like a Christmas tree. This actually, from this photo, it looks like a Christmas tree.
It's
a pretty incredible photo.
Yeah. I kept them, you clone, some days you feel like all you're doing is cloning stuff, right? Just to keep it going. But I think I kept him going for 4 or 5 years. And everything I hit, the same thing happened. It ended up with more potency, and caryophyllene either went to the top or became one of the top couple of terps. So all the stuff had a little bit of spice in it. And it wasn't quite pepper, but it was more spice. But it increased the potency, I think, in every cross I did. We hit a bunch of strains. I think I hit 5 different orange strains. Didn't seem to mix too well with some of the blueberry stuff, but it mixed really, really well with the fruit. So I kept most of it on the fruit side, because then you get in the spice and the fruit. There was one called Booper, which was Bag of Oranges from Randy at Useful Seeds, who sadly passed away last spring. But we went through 5 different orange strains. The Booper story is it'll be quick, but it's really kind of funny. So,
well, they don't need to be quick.
No, I know, but I was going off track. I wanted to talk about the Panama Red and one of the crosses and one of the interactions on Instagram. But on the Booper, so we get Bag of Oranges, we grow it out. I get a beautiful female, and they're all femmes. So this one turned black when it was finishing, and it was absolutely beautiful. So I pollinate it with the Panama Red. It's probably a 4-foot plant, and I start from the bottom, and I'm crushing it up. I'm saving the keef. I'm literally just looking for seeds. I don't really care about the weed so much as getting the seeds. I went through the entire plant. When I got to the apical bud, the last bud on the top, there was 1 seed. So in this entire breeding, I got 1 single seed. And, Murphy's Law, I didn't keep a cut of the Bag of Oranges. So I couldn't go back and do it again with the same plant. So I grew out that 1 plant. So it's Bag of Oranges and Panama Red. So I just named it Booper. And the guys around here still have it. There's a couple guys that it's their regular stable. No matter what else they grow, they keep it growing. I actually lost the plant about a year and a half ago and got it back again, I don't know, about 2 months ago. So it stays around. It's an unbelievable plant. Um, and because it was only the one seed and I was afraid of losing it again, I created a bunch of S1s. So I reversed it, cloned it, hit it with hit the clone with the reverse plant, and then made a bunch of seeds. So it's still out there. And then maybe 4 years ago, when Randy was running Useful Seeds, I gave him a bunch to give away as freebies. Yeah, it's just the Boop is just a really good plant. It's spicy orange. It's happy. It's really social. The weed's really, really nice. And that was one of the good ones that came out of the Panama Red. But when I grew that beast, story I want to tell about Instagram is, you get all these different feeds you see in all these different plants. And this guy, his name's Will, lived in Seattle, and he crossed a killer Malawi to a Punta Roya. So the Punta Roya, he actually picked up in Colombia. So he went down to Colombia for 2 months trying to sort the red, right? Punta Roya. And he said after about, so he finally found one of the highs he had, which his description is, if you're sitting down and you smoke the Punta Roya, he said it feels like you're being elevated off the chair. Your boxing up off of the chair. So he brought those back to Seattle and did a couple of crosses, and he did this killer Malawi, and he called it Red Death. So I don't know how many he had. He had a dozen maybe growing, and this one Red Death number 6 just looked like a perfect match for the Panama Red. So I wanted the plant, and he doesn't know me. I don't know him. So the Panama Red. So Will hunted the Punta Roya, and then he did the killer Malawi cross, and then he's got a dozen of those growing in Seattle. And again, nobody knows who anybody is. So I contact him, and I'm like, I'd like a cut of the plant. And I said, I'm coming from Boston. I'm coming out to Seattle on a business trip, and I'd like the plant. So he said, fine. So, I think it was probably a month between the conversation and the time I was going to Seattle, and I'm all psyched because now I get to do these, these nice, I get some Colombian with the Punta Roya, which I like with the Panama Red. The Malawi adds a little bit of spike, a little bit of zest to it. And I think it's going to be a really good cross. So we're going back and forth, and about a week before I fly out, he calls me up and he said, I'm not going to be around. So it's hard to frame it, but like I said, you don't know who's going to be who on Instagram. So all of a sudden, I think I'm going to Seattle. I think I'm going to get this plant, and then right before I get to go out there, the person's telling me that he's not going to be around. So I'm a little bit bummed out, and he calls me back 2 days later, and he said, look, I rent a house, and my landlord's around. He'll let you in the house. He doesn't know me from Adam, right? So I fly out. His landlord meets me at the house, go inside the house. I don't know how he showered because the bathroom was full of plants. The back porch was full of plants. And he left me some, not chickamasas, but whatever. He left me some scissors and two water bottles to take the cuts. So he left all the stuff for me, opened up his house, wasn't even around. I go out on the back porch.
And his landlord knew what was going on?
Yeah. His landlord was in a house close to him, and also smoked weed. So they're all fine. So they're all fine with it. But I literally went out on the back porch, and there was 10, 12 plants, whatever there was on that back porch, and I knew the plant right away. So I went over and I checked, and it was the number 6. So I took a bunch of cuts. And then I went to a supermarket because stuff still really wasn't, legal yet. And what I did is I bought a salad, and I took the like 3 or 4 cuts, and I wrapped them in some paper towels, and then stuck lettuce over them and put them in the thing like I was taking a salad, and I brought it on the plane with me and flew back to Boston.
You know what? That is one of the most interesting ways that I've heard of smuggling clones, or moving clones from place to place. I might have to use that in the future because I think it's actually a great idea. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, so I brought it back in a salad, um, bred that plant, and as I typically do, I've made a couple of different decisions, but 90% of the time, I'm just naming stuff that's the name of the parents, right? Because I think it's easier to figure out, and if people are tracking stuff down and they want something from a line, it's easier to figure out. So I named it Panama Red Death, and the plants. Panama Red Death 17. I know a guy I believe he's in the black market in Brooklyn. He's been selling it for years. I actually sent him the cut. The cut exists a couple places, but not many. And it's been it's been at least 3 or 4 years, maybe more. And he said it's one of his more popular strains that people are buying. So they like it. It's out there. I don't have that plant anymore. I'll eventually get it back from him to do another line with it. But yeah, that Panama Red Death turned out to be really, really good weed. Actually, I getting to the point now where I've got to go to F3s on it. But the few seeds that were available that I put on the FCP site over at Daga, those move right away. And the interesting part is when I give them to Peter to help raise money for the future cannabis project, I generally don't even say prices. Like, he can sell them for whatever he wants. He can do freebies. It's my way of helping him do the stuff, and getting the seeds out so people can grow hopefully some really good weed. So to finish up, so I get the plant, get it home. I still never met him. He's never met me. He let me in his house, hooked me up with the landlord, and then set me up with the equipment so that I could bring the clones back home. And now I'm not real clear on the time, but it was probably a year later. He was going to a wedding in Maine. And I said, well, stop by and have dinner. So stopped by with his girlfriend. The wife and I had dinner. And there was, theoretically, they were going to have dinner and head up to Maine. I think they left around 1:30 or 2 o'clock in the morning. I mean, we just sat there for hours and hours and hours. And as it turns out, he opened up like a bed and breakfast in Columbia. He's gone. He left Seattle, took the young lady, and they set up shop in Columbia. Whether I ever get down there to visit him or not will be interesting. But yeah, really, really good guy. And it's the same thing. Like, I had no idea what he looks like, no idea on anything. It's like, yeah, stop over for dinner, and we end up, I don't know, 5 or 6 hours just, kind of shooting the shit. It was really, really nice. But that was, yeah, go ahead.
What I wanted to say is, these are the type of stories that this channel is all about.
It's good people out there.
What'd you say?
There's good people out there.
There really is, and it's sometimes you feel like, everybody in the world is shit, and then all of a sudden you just meet great people. And I've had that experience lately because of the podcast. I just feel so blessed that I've been meeting such awesome people and making such great friends. And I'm going to say this, right now, that I hope that this is the beginning of a lifelong friendship for us.
Yeah, thank you. That'd be great. Yeah, people complain about Instagram, and Instagram can be awful, right? Because we're doing stuff in legal states that don't have any issues, and they still give the cannabis guys a hard time. So that kind of sucks, and then you get the kids out there that, they don't finish reading the sentence before they're replying back on something negative because they know everything. So that's the plus of losing my account before, is I've lost those accounts, and now I'm dealing with people who love the plant and like making good weed. So it's pretty nice. And you mentioned before how I don't take any money. Um, I don't trade either, right? I mean, I'm in a unique position where I don't really need the money. I'm in a position where I can't even take the money. So I take nothing, and I don't even trade, right? Because if I trade, then trade implies, value for value, and somebody could be disappointed. And I'd rather give and not expect anything in return. So the only thing that can happen is I can get something in return sometime in the future, and I'm only going to be happy about it, right? I'm not going to think, wow, that was a bad trade. So for me, it's a really positive experience all the way around.
I mean, the
I
one thing I'll say about that, and I heard you say that yesterday, when we chatted briefly, is, I mean, I understand, you don't need to trade, but I think that you could trade if you just went into it with little expectation. Like if somebody says, "Hey, look, I have something really special. I'd like to trade you for it." Um, you would be giving it to him anyway. So if you don't get something that's, you know, awesome, it doesn't really matter. But there's a potential that somebody is giving you something really special. So I didn't understand the no trading for that reason, just because. And the other thing is, someone's trying to give something to you that they really want you to have.
Well, you said it though. They're giving it to me. I'll do that, but I'm not. Trade implies value. So I'm not looking for any value out of the plant.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking to get it out to people. And, frankly, I mean, when it comes down to it, why am I doing it? I'm doing it for my ego. I want to make good weed. I want people to go, Boston Bob's weed's really good. That's what I want, right? I don't need the money. I'm looking for accolades. Like it's funny hearing me say it, but it's true. Like it's an ego thing for me. You know, I, I've done a bunch of stuff before. I understand breeding. I got my OCD, which is going to keep me wired in. I'm not going to be able to give up. Um, so the value proposition for me doesn't exist. Actually right now in Massachusetts, there's two legal entities. One of them's got 60,000 square feet. Another one's got, acres that they do sun grown. I work with them. I give them the seeds, right? I work with them in terms of the genetics. And right now in Massachusetts, it's funny because I was thinking about, am I a home grower? Am I a craft grower or breeder? It's like, I'm not really a home grower because I got 5 different strains that are right now in dispensaries in Massachusetts. And I'm doing that because those guys don't have to pay anything. I'll work with them to get the right strain. And then, they can run a bench so I can see 80 plants, right? And and then I can make a selection that I want from males and females that I could never do on my own. That would take me years, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
for me, when I'm going through stuff, maybe I go through 40 plants at a time. But to be able to go through 100 and make that selection, that's a pretty unique opportunity. And the weed's good enough where the dispensaries can sell it, right? Because the kids are still buying by the numbers. So it's got to be strong enough for the dispensaries to sell. And, this one place has an R&D room. So they'll try different stuff. I'm like, here's one I've never even tested, but the parents are really good. I know this and this is likely to happen, but, we all know best intentions, right? I mean, just because everything's great doesn't mean the weed's going to be that good. So having somebody who's okay doing R&D with you, it's a huge plus for me. So it helps me get to my goal of producing really good weed.
Do you know if either of those facilities Greg Chemdog is involved in? Because I know that he's in Massachusetts, working at a licensed farm.
Yeah, he's not on the two that I'm doing stuff with now. He's not a part to either of them
Okay.
because I know who owns this other one, and it's just it's a massive facility, and they're really good people. So that's an advantage that I have also. Trying to think of another Panama Red story. So I got the Booper, I got the Panama Red death that came in. Yeah, that's been a really great plant.
You talk about the Panama Red. Do you have any other breeding stories that you want to tell, or stories about people that you know?
So JR at Saturnalia Seeds in the last couple of years. I think the Panama Red would go really good with Federation Hawaiian Sativa. So I think he sells seeds. He does some stuff. He's a really good farmer, nice guy. And we got chatting a few years back to try to get it going. So I sent him pollen, and it didn't take. And then he sent me a cut of his mother, and then I tried pollen, and that didn't take. And I got Panama Red Death pollen, and that was an accident. And I got maybe 20 seeds, I think. I got very, very few seeds, I think, on that one. But because of the Panama Red and because we were both trying to get it going, and eventually I'll have to go to F3s and get the Panama Red back into that Federation Hawaiian Sativa. I think he's up to either F7 or F8. So it's really nice and stable. It's an absolute, he sent me a cut, and the plants absolutely stand out. It literally smells like citrus shoe polish. Like if you had a can of black kiwi shoe polish, and it was you poured citrus acid on those or oranges, that's what it smells like. It's a great smell. It's a really clean up high. Love the plant. And because of that, I think I've bred that thing 3 or 4 times already. You know, and this is just my opinion. I would never do a filial generation increase on somebody else's plant, right? Because they've done the work, and for me to go and take it in a different direction than they were taking it, it doesn't seem right to me. So if I get a plant from somebody, I get a cut. I'm basically only doing out crosses. Now, on a rare occasion, I might go back and do a back cross with a plant that I really like, but that's pretty rare. It doesn't seem right to me to take somebody's work and go ahead and do F2. So like in JR's case, I've bred that Hawaiian, I think 4 times. And then what I'm doing is I'll send him 100 seeds, okay? So that if he can give them away, throw them away, grow them, do whatever he wants. But it's my way of saying thank you for letting me have that cut. So I still have that cut right now. It's a really nice plant, and it all started again with the Panama Red male. The one thing that the Panama Red male did for me was it made me focus, even though it's anecdotal because it's a one-shot deal. The males that show last. We started to chat yesterday about the male piece, which I love. Honestly, I have much more fun hunting males than females because it's a little harder, and you have to have
A little?
yeah, a little. But it's interesting. To me, it's intent, right? It's not the perfect male. It's the perfect male for the cross. Like, what are you trying to get out of the cross? And what's the intent on the breeding? Because if you have two people with the same set of genetics, and one person's looking for, tall, wispy, 16-week plant, and somebody's looking for tighter nodes, something that they can grow inside, it's likely, I mean, it may take some time, but it's likely that both of those people can find a male that will help do that job. So there's not one perfect male to do all the jobs. We we mentioned DJ Short real briefly, and that at least, and I don't know him, but my understanding is he likes a male for a structure and doesn't add anything so that he can keep the female traits that he likes and make a bigger, better, a stronger plant, right? So with that intent, he's looking for a specific kind of male. Me personally, I'd rather have a male bring something to the dance, right? I'm looking for the combination that's going to increase me something, and
So I've had a number of people tell me that that's the way they breed.
Which way?
Where they want a male that allows the female to shine, right? But then it seems like you're not really making a cross. You're just trying to get your female into seed form. So I really don't understand that logic. Okay, so particularly when you're doing regular seeds. So I have a friend that he does a lot of feminized. And for feminized, and we both agree, him and I, that selfing can cause problems, right? So he prefers to use a male that has traits of vigor, flower size, and yield, but he wants something that's not going to give the terpenes, okay? And that way, if he's crossing it to, whatever, let's say runts, the progeny is going to be runts, and that it's not going to have, the terpene and even the high of the parent plant. So when you're doing feminized plants, I guess I can wrap my head around that. But when you're doing a cross with regulars, it's harder for me to understand why you would want a male that isn't giving much besides fertility,
So I agree with you. My preference is I want the males to bring something to the party. So I'll do terpene profiles. I test all my stuff. So I know where the terpenes are. I know where CBG, CBC, CBD, especially lately when I'm doing the longer flowering stuff, I don't want any CBD at all, because all it's going to do is it's going to muffle that nice high from the long flowering. So I go through and test everything. So, but on your piece, I agree with you that the males that I like, I want to bring something to the table. That I will say though, I'd like clarification from you on S1s, because I've never had a problem selfing plants, and I've never had a problem with any of the seeds. And my guess is 90% of them come out just like the mom. Right? I mean, I guess I don't understand whether everybody's taking separate clones or they're STSing or reversing a plant and taking seeds from the plant that's reversed. Now, if you did that, and I posted on one of the forums recently because guys were talking about selfing and seemed like they were doing it for the first time, and they were getting the ratios right for sodium thiosulfate and the silver nitrate to get that going. But I think maybe an issue with some of the femmes is they're taking seeds from the plant that's being reversed. Now then I could see an issue, because now you're stressing the plant and you're asking it to produce its babies at the same time you're putting it under that stress. So how many people do that? Honestly, I have no idea. Maybe nobody does it.
I think that that's what most people are doing.
Yeah, that's crazy. I
Yeah.
mean, you set up you clone the plant, right? And so especially if you want to keep it, you get 2 or 3 clones, and then you grow the clone till it's 2 weeks in flower, a week and a half in flower, so it's just starting to kick in, and stretch is slowing down. Then you start STS in the other plant. So the plant that's producing the female pollen is hitting the clone. It's not hitting that same plant. I mean, technically it's the same genetics, but it's physically not the same plant. So now you've got a healthy female taking in pollen. I've never had problems. I've never had a male come up. I've never had any kind of real pheno variation. I've
Hermaphroditism?
zero. And the one thing that and again, I don't have the data to say this is true, but my guess is the harder the concentration of STS it takes to reverse a plant is how stable it is. So some of them you have a really, really tough time. I think those are less likely to pass on the herms. I think the hermaphroditic traits, if you used an STS solution, and let's say you used just call it 5 was your solution, which is a combination of the two, and you put half the solution on, the plant turned really quickly, then it's not that strong a male. That's also why I like these late showing males, right? I mean, that's the Panama Red showed me what a strong male, and through the progeny, it proved itself it was a strong male. It added strength, it added the spice, it did all I wanted. So if I get down to having 4 males left, you know, um, I'm not picking the one that's first in flower, especially everything else is even. What I've generally done over time, because I feel pretty strongly about it, is I'll start with 40 plants, and when I put the males in flower, I take the first 10 to 20% that show sex, and I just kill them. I don't even flower them out. I want the ones that show up at the end. Now, it doesn't have to be the very last one, but I want them in the last 25% because I think those are stronger. It's I hate saying it, but the old adage about the buck and the old buck and the young buck up at the hill. And the young buck says, "Hey, let's run down there and get some of the get a female." And the old buck says, "You know what? Let's walk down and get them all." Right? I mean, honestly, I think that's the way the males are.
Well,
I think if they take longer, at least in my experience, they've been stronger.
and so you've tested it out. You've done the ones that flower faster and the ones that flower slower.
I did it once. Other than that, and it's the ones that flower early, I have no interest in at all.
Well, I'm going to let me make a comment about this. Um, I I don't believe I have as much experience breeding as you do. You've been doing this focusing on it for many years. But to me, and I hope you'll not be offended by what I'm going to say, because it's not directed directly at you. It's directed at the idea.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Okay. But the idea that we can select a male based on how fast it flowers, a stem rub, the structure of the plant. To me, it's a little bit of arrogance, and I think that the only way that you can really know what this male is going to give you
Progeny.
is the same way that we only know what a female is going to give you, and that's by growing it. And so the way I do it, particularly when I'm going to do like an F1 hybrid, is I try to use as many of the males as I can separately. So let's say, I start 20 seeds and I get 10 males. Okay. I'm going to try to keep those 10 males clone them, and one at a time, I'm going to flower them with the females. Then you test out the seeds that are grown with those. And then after you've seen, the 10 different males, what they've produced, then you can select, because we're not guessing. We have data, and that to me, it's the only way I can see doing it. Maybe it's because I don't have the skill set, but I also worry, my family heritage is Jewish, so I guess Jewish people, they worry a lot. But I worry like what we could lose when you do that, by having that arrogance in thinking that you can visually make a selection.
So I can't disagree with you, because the only real true test is the progeny, right? Is the male producing something that's better than something else? But the reality is, to do that, I mean, right now, my average project takes
insane
2
amount
years.
of work.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so yeah, I mean, I can't do it. So I live and die by the sword. I have, I'll give you an example of how about an example of how my stuff didn't work? So I got lavender. It's gone out to a couple people. It's an absolutely great plant. And I bred it to a chili verde, which was called chill lavender. Turned out to be a fabulous strain. I've still got one of the girls that I'll have for a long, long time. It tests high. It's got beautiful flavor. It's a really nice high. So that breeding worked really, really well. And the lavender was a plant that worked really, really well. So then I took a lavender male, so chili verde and lavender, and went back to the lavender again to try to make it a little more creamy. I want a creamy kind of floral. And when I went through and picked the male, so first of all, like I talked about, last to show, but honestly, probably my number one item that I'm looking at is root growth, right? I need to see good root mass, because then I know the plants will have vigor and the plants are going to be healthy. If I've got 5 of them and 2 of them the roots look like hell, and the other roots are twice as much, I'm not even going to look at those plants. They're gone, because root growth is big. So then I got structure, then I got different growing tendencies. I got leaf morphology. Depends whether I want to do a complementary cross, or I want to have a conflicting cross where I'm going to bring something out. So there's different reasons to look at the male. But so I used my general process of root growth, structure, last to show, and then I bred it for the lavender back cross. Now, a bunch of people have grown it out, and the weed's real good, but somehow I brought out these recessive traits, and they have weak branching. So the weed's really good. And if you grow it in a scrog or a sea green or something like that, it's probably going to be fine. But the reality is the branches can't hold the weight of the buds.
And it's not because the buds are giant. They're just weak branches.
Yeah, they're weak branches. Mm-hmm. And maybe I could silica or calcium up and change the feeding. But the reality is
it doesn't have the structure.
It doesn't have the structure.
But so let me add something to that real fast.
Yeah.
So, and you have to understand that I come from a different generation than you. My generation was the chem dog generation, and that's kind of what I'm known for. But if the chem dog was a male, for instance, and we were using these type of selection processes, it would have been tossed, because it grows like shit. It's not a strong plant. It's it's a poor grower with poor structure, but then it's producing the highest quality flower with the terpenes that we love.
Right.
So that's why I believe that the only way to really know is to grow the stuff out. And, to be honest with you, if the chem dog was grown, I believe he only had like 6 seeds or something when he started this. But if he had 100 seeds, that plant might have just been lost, because it literally grew so poorly and it was a difficult plant to feed. So,
Yeah,
I know the work is impossible to do. It's not like it's difficult, but it's
well, you
one
got
thing to say, hey, look, I'm I'm just doing the best I can in an impossible project. It's another thing to say, I'm selecting it because of this, because this is what I think makes it better. Because, like I said, like the most interesting thing that I've heard as far as selecting a male is someone told me that, and I've never done this, that people will reverse a male to get it to put out female flowers so that then they can rub those flowers to try to get a smell off of them, a terpene, not just a stem rub, but like of an actual flower. And I said, oh, well, that's at least giving us more information to go with. I don't know how valid it is,
well. So
but
let take that statement right there. So if I'm going to look for a male, let's say that I'm looking for a F1 male to make F2s. So I've already grown out a whole bunch of females. I've already picked the one that I like best, and we would tend to agree that it's not terribly hard to pick the best female after you grow a whole bunch out, right?
right,
You're right. You test it, you smoke it, and it's the one you like or not. So now I've already grown at least one, maybe 2 runs of the females. And if it's an F1, and let's say the stuff isn't crazy, you basically have 3 main phenotypes, right? You got 50% that are a combination of both parents, and you got 25 that lean to the mom, and you got 25 that lean to the dad. So, and if the one you picked, the female that you like the best was in the middle, then you generally know what the leaf morphology looks like. You know what the node structure looks like. So you know what that plant looks like. So now go run 30 or 40 males, and you're going to have the same distribution roughly of the phenotypes. So now you take, if you're breeding to the middle, then you can lop off 50% of the plants. Take the ones that lean to the mom, take the ones that lean to the dad, and get rid of those. Now when you're looking at the male, I'm still looking at root growth. I'm still looking at structure, and when I'm looking at the leaf morphology, what I'm really trying to do is I'm trying to pick a male that looks as close to the female that I like, and that's how I'm going to get to my F2s. And the reality is, it's nothing's going to be identical, but it's going to be close. So now when I get F2s, even though I'm going to get a broader range of phenos, right, on the F2s, I might have literally, you could have up to 10 different phenos, right, stretching from the mom to the dad. But you find that next one, and you find the plant that's similar to the male that you used before, which is similar to the female. Now I can do a back cross, and that gives me something that's very, very close to the original mom. Or I could try to pick 2 that are the same, which is a little more risky, bottleneck it even farther, and then produce the F3s. So it's the intent of what you're trying to do with the male. So it really depends on intent for me. And I think you're right that progeny decides the male. But except for this lavender fail, where I'm not happy with the structure of the plant, going through the process when I'm trying to do an outcross or a complementary cross, I know kind of what I'm looking for. And I'm looking for that in the plant. And the other thing is, you grow a bunch of plants and I send them to the lab and I know what the terp profile is. So I know that I want to highlight a certain terp profile. I don't want to bring myrcene in, right? Like what I'm doing right now, and who knows if I'll be successful. I want terpinolene and caryophyllene, and I want myrcene way down on the list, right? But it's not necessarily easy to do because myrcene's all over the place. So I'm testing the different plants. I know what the structure of the plants are. It's one of the reasons it takes a couple of years to do it, because you're out there going through a couple of different runs. Like the people that and there's plenty of growers that are much better growers than I am. And I think the people that I respect that grow, most of them have said the same thing. You get the plant dialed in on your third run. The first run, you're finding out about the plant. The second run, you're finding out, really trying to dial in the feed. And the third run is when you actually dial in the plant. So how long does it take to do 3 runs? Right? And that's just to find one plant. So it takes a lot. And to run 100 or to run 20 males and then breed them all out and figure out which is the best by smoking the progeny, you're looking at 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
it takes time to do it.
It takes a long time. So you live by the sword, you die by the sword. I've had some really, really nice ones. And like I said, the weed on the lavender, it's good weed, but unlike ChemDog, it's not so special that I'm willing to take this viney, flopping over, can't hold up the buds plant, right? And the one thing that I would say that on the approach that I tend to use for males is I don't think the plant that you're trying to get to has to be, I don't know how to say this. I want structure first. Like, I'm not taking a special plant necessarily and then saying I'm going to breed to this because it's a special plant. Doesn't mean I haven't done that. But what I'm doing is, if I get a male and I want to breed it to a female that I like, I want obsessive root growth, right? I want to see that thing, just because the old adage of more roots, more fruits still applies. So I want massive root growth. If I don't get the root growth, I'm not using it. Actually, we don't have to bring up the graph right now, but catfish is one that I've worked on for the last little bit. And I was trying to hopefully find a male, and I had 2 females that literally were 50 to 75% more root mass than any of the males. So seeing that, I just killed all the males. I'm like, if I don't have a male that's good enough to have the same root growth as one of the plants I'm selecting, then I'm going to have to go through it again. And maybe when I go through it again, only the females have good root mass. I'll find out the next time I try to do it. But I think if you create the next generation with a strong plant, and to me, a strong plant is root growth mostly. Now those seeds, now if you find the special one, it's still going to be a strong plant. When you take one of these other ones that, the roots aren't that strong, the plant's kind of spindly, but the weed's really, really good, you breed that, you're going to have a lot harder time. I think if you bred a stronger male to that series, then you're going to end up with stronger plants, and you're still going to find something. So I'd rather start with a strong plant first. But will you find the next ChemDog? Will you find the next bag seed that turns out to be great? I mean, probably not. Right? So, I mean, that's kind of my 2 cents on the males. The other thing is, I've been fooling around with pulling out recessive traits. That to me is a lot of fun, because if you have really good quality plants and I can pull out the recessive traits, now I'm getting something that nobody's seen before. And if the genetics are good on the plants that I'm using, which I think they are and I hope they are, then it's likely that 25% of those plants could be special. I'm not expecting them all to be special. Yeah, I want to jump in. Cosmic, how
Hey,
are you?
before you do,
Yeah.
I want to introduce you to our co-host, Cosmic.
Cosmic, how are you?
This is Boston Bob. And Cosmic is actually the guy that helped me record my first podcast, and he's a regular co-host. He, like you, is a professional and has a day job, so he's not always often able to start or finish the podcasts when they begin. But I love and respect the guy, and so he's always invited to be our co-host. So welcome, Cosmic, and I'd like to introduce you to Bob.
Man, what an intro. Thank you, Gabby, and Bob, it's very nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Cosmic.
I'm working on my intros, okay?
Doing a good job.
Bob thanked me for his intro, too, and they're both truly heartfelt.
I want to bring up, we talked about the males, we talked about the seeds and intention. So Cornbread Ricky, who's one of the two guys at Swamp Boy Seeds, I had a conversation with him with my son 7 or 8 years ago, and it made a really, really big impression. And it's a kind of a different way to think about things. He said there's only two kinds of seeds. That's it. The seeds where you grow a plant and you grow and get what's expected from the plant, or you try to find a plant. And those are the two kinds of seeds. You're either growing or you're finding. And if you look at the retail market, especially in dispensaries, right, or a cultivation facility, those guys get mother plants and get 200 clones, and all the weeds, it's not close, it's exactly the same. It's the same plant. So I see the value in doing the first, which is making seeds where if you grow a plant, you get the plant you expect, right? And you plant 100 seeds, 100 seeds, 90 of them are going to be the same kind of plant. So that really takes place probably around F4. Maybe if you're lucky, F3, but F4, F5, F6, they're all going to be like that. And people are getting the lines. But the other side is, do I want to buy a seed and grow Jack Herrera, right? There's a couple guys that have F8, F9s. I think they're beautiful plants, right? And there's a whole bunch of strains that have been filial generationed enough into the seeds where you know what you're going to get. And then there's the people who want to find a plant. And the find a plant to me is much more fun. I think the interesting part is, I think a bunch of people who buy seeds don't necessarily know the difference between growing and finding. And I think there's less information available when somebody's got seeds, whether they're buying, selling, growing, that they know where they are in what generation and what to expect, right? Most people probably realize F1s, you're going to have 3 main phenos. Not many people, I think, realize on an F2 you could literally have 10 or 12 phenos. And then, Gabby, like you said, if you're running a whole bunch of stuff like you're running, that's close to open pollination even, right? So that starts the whole process over. And if you get to F3 and F4, then you expect some kind of consistency in the cultivar. But who's growing for what? And when you're buying, do you know what you're actually buying? Are you buying to grow? Or are you buying to find? So I like the finding. The finding is much more fun. Because if you find that special plant, you clone it, you give it to your friends, it goes to the dispensaries, they're selling on the market, versus, getting a stable line. But the way that you may find that plant, you probably have to use a plant that's come from a stable line, right? Because if not, you get in these polyhybrids and all the stuff is the same.
Yeah.
Right? So what I found is you can work a line and then bring in something that's been worked, let's say F4 to F7, that's going to be stable, bring it into something in an outcross, and then find something that wasn't there. So I think you can do that, but that's you still need both seeds, right? You need the grow seed and you need the find seed. And then how you bringing them together. Bring 2 grow seeds together, you're going to get something. You bring two fine seeds together, I think it's more polyhybrid, and I think it's a little muddy. So actually, might be a good time to let's talk about the capfish.
Okay.
Um,
And is that one that you sent the photo of?
it is. So,
okay, let me pull it up.
well, actually, yeah, go to the albino first.
Alrighty.
So, and I got to look for mine too. Okay, give me 1 sec. So, albino, it depends where you see it, but the numbers are 1 in 1,000 to 1 in 10,000. You get an albino plant, and this is 100% not variegation. It's an albino plant. So, what I did was I bred to bring out recessive traits. Did I know I was going to get the albino? I had absolutely no clue, right? But when I show you this other one and we go to the chart on the capfish, I thought there's a way to bring out recessive traits. So do me a favor, bring up the one that's number 3. It's kind of grayed out. It's
Okay.
a pedigree chart. So what happens is, and I think I thought this came from Miracle 15, which is the male that Capulator used to make the Mac 1. And the reason I thought that is if we're on the number 3 graph now with the capfish, so capfish, then the parents, and go to the grandparents. So in the grandparents, both dads are fish piss. They're fish piss number 4. Has been a really good strain for me. And I'm going to go off topic just for a second and for Gabby. So in this particular one, Gabby, on fish piss, when I selected the male, not only did I go through my regular process about root growth and structure, I actually put these in flower, pulled off all of the pollen sacs, and then sent it to the lab to have the stalk and the stems tested for THC. And the variation was 1.5% to 2.5%, with most of them around 2. And fish piss number 4 came out at almost 2.6% THC just from the rough plant itself. So that's actually how I selected this male. And this is another one where almost everything I've touched, like the Cecil's Green and the Macfish isn't at dispensaries, but Cecil Green is still out in the dispensaries. The fish piss has done really, really well. So I don't know really what to call it, but if you look at the top line and you go up from catfish to Cecil's Green, and then look at the parents, fish piss and OCD M15. So
So
what
on
I'm
the top line, I see fish piss.
and then underneath it, OCD M15.
Right.
So those are the parents for Cecil's Green. So what I'm doing, and literally it takes a couple of years to do this, I take the fish piss and I breed it to OCD M15. And there's nothing related in the OCD M15 to fish piss. So it's an outcross. Then drop down to the bottom parents underneath that, and it's fish piss and Mac 1.
Right.
Okay? So same thing, there's no relation. But what happens is, if you take this 2 that are circled, OCD M15 and Mac 1, and go back up, they both have the same father, which is M15 of Miracle 15, which is the lone male that Cap used to make these plants. So I intentionally want the great-grandfathers of the unrelated plants to be the same. So when the fish piss goes in and it meets Mac 1, it's interacting with those genetics on the bottom to make Mac fish. And then when the fish piss goes into OCD M15, it's making Cecil's Green. These are 2 different plants. But the difference is, if you look at the genetics behind it, the dad's the same, and then the grandfather or the great-grandfather's the same. So what happens is, when the alleles match up on the genes, whether it's a multi-allele gene or just the 2, it's going to probably make homozygous recessive traits. You'll find something that didn't exist in this previous generation. Like, you got to go back 3 or 4 generations to get this done. So when I did this, I figured I'm going to get some weird stuff. This is not a complementary breeding, whereas if I did similar plants and brought them together, this is a contrasting breeding where I think I can bring out recessive traits. So that's actually why I did this. And then if you go back and you look at the albino, which is supposed to be 1 in 1,000, is 20 to 25% of these seeds, right? So literally, they grow up as seedlings. There's 0 chlorophyll. So somewhere back in the history, and I think we figured it out, it's actually the Miracle 15's father, Starfighter. So there's some type of recessive trait all the way back in that Starfighter gene that has something that shuts off chlorophyll. And so what happens is that's how I get them. And I literally, it's 20 to 25%, which according to Mendel, which is what you should have, right? When you split those phenos. And and I always thought it was Miracle 15. And I got a note from Rick, who runs Mosca Seeds. If you know Mosca Seeds, he's come out with some really, really nice stuff. I like him a lot. He was telling me in his pink animal crackers, he's had the occasional albino. And if you look at the pink animal crackers, he's got a bunch of Starfighter in there. And I know the fish piss, so I was pretty sure it didn't come from the fish piss, and that it came from the Mac dad. So I bring out recessive traits. Now, so if I grow out 20 seeds and 20 to 25% of them are albinos, I don't even have to pick ones to kill. They're dead in 2 weeks, right? I mean, there's no chlorophyll. It can't grow. And basically the cotyledons generally hold food for 10 to 14 days before you got to feed them. So the plant stays alive while the cotyledon's actually providing food to the plant. And as soon as the cotyledons run out of food, plant's dead.
So something we're talking about was grafting. And I know we're in like fantasy land, now for a moment, but I was thinking about it after we spoke. So I grow San Pedro cactus, and there's been many occurrences of variegated plants and some albinos. And when they're found, the only way to grow them is to graft them to something that does have chlorophyll. And so, we're talking about, like, could you graft them, these albinos? To you, there was no benefit. To me, although I'm not saying I'm ready to do the work either. There's curiosity. And so what I wonder about is a couple of things. Number one, could you actually graft something so small and delicate? Because cactus, they're much bigger. Even as seedlings, they have a more of a structure to graft to, and a seedling, the stem is so thin and soft. I don't know how you would do it. But what I was fantasizing about was if you could get a albino like this to flower and finish, the terp profile on that would have to be super unique because it has no chlorophyll. So, because the chlorophyll has a strong impact on the way the flower tastes. And so to smoke a plant or consume a plant that had no chlorophyll, I just found it as intriguing.
Yeah, and my thoughts, right? I don't think it can happen.
You don't think you can graft it?
No, I mean, maybe in a lab with somebody who is really, really good at it, maybe there's a chance. I'm going to send you 20 seeds. You can do whatever you want. You graft it. I'd love to see it. But for me, it's Chinese proverb, good luck, bad luck, who can tell, right? For me, it's better because I'm looking for something special, and I think you don't get something really good without something bad. And if there's
Mm-hmm.
something bad, there's likely something good, right? It's kind of, the karma thing in nature. So the plant's automatically culling 25%. So now I've got kind of the middle phenos and the phenos that lean towards the fish piss. So my pheno variation in these is smaller, right? I mean, they're relatively consistent with there is some pheno variation, but in this particular strain, I found one plant, the number 11, where the other plants are myrcene and caryophyllene, which is, kind of a standard profile. It's and the weeds honestly, the weed's kind of special, but this number 11 and the other the ones that I tested, the terpinolene was minuscule. This number 11, the terpinolene is twice the terpene rate of anything else in the plant. And I could tell when it was growing. I could tell halfway through in flower. It smells like sweet turpentine. Like it's a really, really nice plant. And I think that's the recessive traits from that same line coming forward. And I think it's coming from the Starfighter and the Colombian. And I think the Starfighter created the albino piece. And I think that really high terpinolene, the terp profile that's coming out of that plant, I think is coming from the Colombian. So if you look back, it's like 5 generations back. So I got a chance. I still have to grow it inside because I grew them all outside last year or this year. I got to grow it inside and see what the real timing is, right? Like exactly when I go to 12-12, find out how long it takes to flower. But I think I can get that kind of soaring Colombian high in a tighter structure that I can grow inside with a shorter flowering period. And honestly, in this one of the guys that the guy who first grew these is out in L.A. and he's a Gangier. He went through the Gangier program, and he sent me a note that it's the most thought-provoking weed, and that's what I got. We talked about how long I've been around for in the beginning. It's honestly the most thought-provoking weed I've ever smoked. I actually, and it's happened to me twice in a week, so it wasn't just a one-shot deal. I gave it some space and I tried it again, but I was thinking about a process, and then I started thinking about why I was thinking that way about thinking about the process. It brought me to this like meta level of thinking, and it's like I've never had a buzz like that. Maybe on that, excuse me, maybe on that Sinsemilla in the 70s, but like I've never had anything like this. So I'm 100% working this plant, and it's because of the recessive traits. So, and like the OC, just to finish up on this, the OCDM15 was a larger, stretchier plant, and everybody knows what the Mac 1's like, right? Little stout, little leathier leaves, a little more shiny. Like, so these plants were different, even though they were kind of related. So when I brought them in with the same male, I think this process gives me the recessive traits. And I want to talk a little bit about something similar. You have any questions on that at all, or are you good?
Well, the one thing I wanted to say is, first of all, this is it's a learning experience for me, and I'm appreciating it. Something that you mentioned earlier was how there's 2 different types of seeds.
Yeah.
The seeds that give you what you know you're going to get, and the seeds that give you the hunt.
The hunt.
Right? The ability to hunt. And that is super true. That's exactly correct. And I think that knowing what you're looking for in that sense, and having, the ability to maybe get something like that, that's what people want. And I think that often that's not what is delivered. Like when you buy a pack of seeds from most seed vendors, it's kind of like you don't know if it's going to be consistent or if it's going to be, the hunt. And for instance, like, let's say seeds are sold at a dispensary to a closet grower, and he sees the picture on the pack or on the flyer of it, they wonder, is that what they're going to get? And it made me remember, something I always go back and think about was when we purchased the Super Skunk from Sensi. I think we had a couple of packs and we started them, and the uniformity was incredible, to the point where we were able to just make a selection and get rid of the rest of them because they were all the same.
Yeah, because you worked the line.
Yeah, and I would hold the catalog. It was a paper catalog from Sensi, and I would hold it up against my bud every single crop that I grew it, just to be like, holy shit, that's what it is, and that's a pretty amazing feeling that you're like, I actually got it. Because when we bought the seeds in Holland, we're like, are we getting ripped off? Are we going to get what we want out of this? And particularly with the Super Skunk, it was exactly it. And then, that was when we were more beginners at growing and when we were looking for something specific. But now the idea of a hunt and being able to find something special, that is probably the most rewarding thing, because you're not pulling out. It's unexpected, so when you find that something special, through the hunt, that's,
but actually think about what you just said, right? So Sensi, that consistent, just make a general assumption, they're F4 or higher, right? So they've got some consistency, but in the older days, especially in the straight black market days, you wanted to know what you got.
Yeah.
So when you bought seeds, they were generally worked lines, because, especially if you were humping up in the woods and you had to do stuff, right? You don't want all sorts of surprises. You want a nice row. You want a nice gathering of similar plants. And then what's happened is as the home growers have come in and everybody sells seeds, you get all these different F1s. So to get that stuff, you got to go to somebody who's worked the lines. And how many people really work the lines? And it does exist. Like I'm doing a little bit, but it takes a long time, right? You got to know the plants. I mean, you got to believe that that there were years making those seeds that you grew, right? And they get into the way they want. So in this market, you got more of the find'ems, and I think if you do these
polyhybrids,
the polyhybrids, I don't think you find much, right? So I mean, and it's just my opinion. There might be great weed, but I think you got to bring out recessive traits from plants. So I'm not inventing something. I'm not making something. I'm trying to create a condition in the genetics where I'm bringing something that was already there, just hasn't been seen yet. So that's kind of fun to me. Like, I like that a lot. But I wonder sometimes when people are buying, like, like take the catfish with the albinos. Somebody buys a pack of 10 seeds and they only plant 2, right? Because how many people actually go all 10? Like for me, I do 30 or 40, right? But there's a ton of people that grow 1 or 2 seeds. So if you bought those catfish seeds and you grew 2 of them and they both turned white and died in 2 weeks, you're not a happy camper, right?
Well, if you know in advance, it's got to come with something on the sticker saying, hey, 20% of these seeds are going to be albino and will die within, 15 to 20 days of them being planted. So, the good news is if they plant 2 out of 10 seeds and they're albinos, probably, the other 8 ones will not be, so...
We had one guy who got 8 out of 10 albinos.
Yeah, it's just,
And
so with that guy, considering who you are, you just send them another pack of seeds and,
Right.
you know, or tell them, hey, if you want to grow something else. But this is how you find something special. You know, this is why it's work and not just come easy, right?
So-
and if it was easy, everyone would be doing it, you know, but it's not. And, you know, hard work pays off.
So let me, because it's a nice follow up, I think, to this one. Can you put up the pedigree chart for number 4?
Doing that too, I wanted to kind of bring up a point about what you guys were talking about as far as like consistency with seeds too.
Okay.
And, you know, a lot of the seed companies these days, their catalog is constantly changing. You know, they always have new strains every year. You know, there's always like a new line coming out. But some of these other companies, especially the old school companies, you know, they have the same strains year after year. And I think that is a kind of a good way to show that you've been consistently working with those strains versus, oh, I just want something new to sell, you know, and
Either
next
that
year
or
we're
it's
going to have something
bullshit.
different. Yeah.
Do you hear me, Cosmic?
Either that or it's bullshit.
Yeah, of course, because like sometimes what these seed companies are doing is they're just putting any seeds in the pack. And so, for instance, if you order clone G, for instance, so that I'm not, you know, putting anyone on blast, but so if you order, seeds, the seed genetic G, right? And they've run out of those, they'll just put whatever they want in the pack, you know, and that's why it's important to buy genetics from reputable people that actually care about what they're doing, you know, and care about their reputation more than they care about just making one more sale.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, I know for a fact that that's common practice, you know, with many of these seed companies, you know, like to give you an example, you know, people make a trip to Holland and, you know, buy some seeds. Most of these people are never coming back anyway, you know, so, you know, and they want to have the full catalog of seeds always. So I think there's a lot of people that don't have proper ethics in the game, you know, and so it's important to know who you're working with.
Absolutely.
I'm sure Bob agrees with that too.
I do. I stay pretty tight. Let's
All
look
right,
at
I got that chart too, number 4.
Yeah, we got the number 4 up.
So, Frosty McFish, and Frosty Fish is the dad, and the Macfish 6 is the mom. So it's the same mom as Catfish.
Right.
Okay. But now this is a complementary breeding. So the two go back to father, grandfather. You got the 2 fish pisses, right, in the third column. And then underneath it is Boss Frost, which I got from Patrick at Pico Brands. He's a California guy. He was very nice and gave me some S3s from this Boss Frost, which is just an absolute monster. So I grew a whole bunch of those and bred this one. And then you can see on the bottom of the same grandparents, it's Fish Piss with Mac 1.
Right.
So now, Boss Frost and Mac 1, they have nothing in common. So I'm not going to get the same kind of allele battle on the genes because they're separate. So Fish Piss is won over Boss Frost for allele position, and the same thing with Mac 1. So when I did this breeding, I assume this is a complementary breeding, and I'm going to get much more consistent phenotypes. And it's exactly what I got. All the plants basically look very, very similar, and the pheno variation is basically in stretch. So 20 or 25% will be a little taller, and 20 or 25% will be a little shorter. But if you looked at them from above and looked at just the leaf morphology and not necessarily the nodes, they all look the same. So this was done to try to add even more, because the fish piss added a lot of potency to everything I did. And none of the fish piss prodigy came out less than probably 24%. They're all 24 to 30%. All the different prodigies I've had with fish piss. Like this Frosty Fish, this is still in dispensaries, and this is a couple of years old. but that's still in dispensaries. So, kind of validates the potency. So I did this as a complementary cross, and I wanted to show it so that if you looked at the other encap fish and you look at this one, they kind of look similar, but what are the differences? The differences on the way back on the mom side, I've got relations that I think are going to conflict when they finally come together and give me those recessive traits. And in this one, I don't have that. And if you look on the very bottom left, this is a note from a year and a half ago. I think this would go really good with Miracle Glue. And Miracle Glue is from Capulator. And
Where's this note at?
It's right under the 4. It's one of my notes from 2023.
Oh, it says Miracle Glue.
Right.
Yeah.
So what I'm doing is I'm always looking at the pedigree to find out, is it complementary? Is it contrasting? Am I gonna increase pheno variation? Am I gonna decrease pheno variation? So that's why when we started talking about the males, that also plays into what I'm looking for. Am I looking to create conflict, or am I looking to complement the line? So if you look at this breeding with the Frosty McFish, you got Boss Frost, which is Gorilla Glue, and Mac 1. Well, Miracle Glue is basically the Miracle 15, which is the dad of Mac 1, and Gorilla Glue. So both grandmothers on this are going to match the plant I'm going in. It's actually a project I'm doing right now. I've already selected the Miracle Glue female, was done in a bench with 40, and it was in an R&D room, and all the plants got PM except for this one plant. And there's a picture on my Instagram. I didn't send it to you. That the fan leaves are covered in trikes like I've never seen.
Oh, I actually saw that picture on your Instagram.
Yeah, so that's this miracle. Now the plant's smaller, right? It's probably not going to work for the guys in the dispensary because they're not going to get the yield from the lights because it's a small plant. But instead of picking the plant that was more robust, I want specifically to breed Miracle Glue number 4, which is very PM resistant and was just absolutely loaded with trikes. So now, this Frosty McFish that I want to breed into it, I literally am doing it as we speak. I watered them this morning. I got 13 males. And as I mentioned before, I'm really a big fan of root growth. I still take my notes once a week on what I think root growth is. But the primary driver for a male selection to breed to this Miracle Glue is PM resistance. So if you look at my tent right now, I got 13 plants, about 8 nodes high, and all the leaves are touching every other leaves. There's no space between the plants, right? I got 13 decent-sized plants filling up a 4x4. I turned the air down and I shut off all the fans. And I'm in a basement of a 30-year-old house. I don't have a problem getting PM. All right, I can get PM anytime I want to get it. So far I found 3 plants that had PM, and then I clean them, I put them back in, and I rotate them so that they all eventually over the next month will all end up in a different spot. So if there's a real dead spot in the tent that one corner is always getting it, or some plant in the middle is covered by leaves, they're always getting it, I literally am rotating the plants around. Now, and I'm telling you, I'm doing it as we speak, so am I going to be successful? I have no idea. But my goal is, if I'm really going to go after this Miracle Glue, this is a complementary breeding because it's generally the same. I get to add in the proven plants from the Frosty McFish. And if I'm lucky, out of these 13 plants, and it's not a huge sample, but out of these 13 plants, if I can find a couple that don't get PM while the rest of them are getting PM, that's the primary motivator for me selecting a male. So like you said, grow them out, check the progeny, do that stuff like we were talking about in the beginning. I think that's fine. Doing root selection and morphology to match something, that's fine. In this particular case, I already know the weed's good. I know the plants are good. Can I get lucky and find something that's PM resistant and breed it to another like plant that's PM resistant? That should increase my odds of getting a really nice plant that is less susceptible to PM. So that's what I'm trying to do.
It's funny because it reminds me of another strain in the Sensi seed catalog. Trying to remember, I think it was the Oasis, but I'm not 100% sure. But it said that it was spider mite resistant. And we wanted to buy that strain for breeding because, this was in the 90s. We really didn't have a clue about how to deal with pests. And, getting a strain that spider mite resistant, that's like, okay, got to have that, So powdery mildew resistant is definitely a good quality. But I mean, generally, any of the plants that are more vigorous and healthy are going to be more resistant, right?
Yeah, but these are all
You don't
healthy.
even have to create a powdery mildew factory like you're trying to do over there to find the ones that get it first. You could pretty much look at the plants that are strongest and healthiest will generally be the most resilient.
Yeah, but if
against
you
that type of stuff.
if you go look at the page, they're all solid.
Yeah.
Because my intent is to breed that way for root growth and solid structure. So out of the 13, I actually killed one this morning, and it's because in the 2 times I tested, it got PM each time, and it was one of the weaker root plants. So no matter what happens to that plant, I would never use it. So as of this morning, I'm down to 12. But to go through that process, you can find them. I've seen them. You see them on a bench. I've got another one it's a ghost dog. It doesn't get PM. And so I found a couple others. So in addition to doing the stuff I like with the long flowering, I really want to get this done because I know it's good weed. And if I can create that other input where these genes hook up together and give me some PM resistance, that's a big plus, especially in New England in the fall. It's a huge plus. You guys might
So
not
one
have the
thing I
same
wanted
issue.
to do at this time, I wanted to direct people to your Instagram, which is Boston Bob Mass. No funky underscores or anything, just Boston Bob Mass. Yeah. So everybody go give him a follow. Only if you're not trolls. Trolls stay away.
Trolls stay
But
away. So
yeah,
before
honestly,
you go, let me finish up
go
with
ahead.
one thing. Can you throw up the number
Yeah,
2, the picture of the plant outside?
sure.
Are you growing hydroponically or with soil?
Soil only.
How are you keeping track of the root growth? Are you just popping it out of the container there and taking a
Yep.
peek?
That's why I don't use fabric, right? Because you can't pull them,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe you can, but I can't. I use plastic pots. I flip them all the time. When I start my seedlings, I actually start my seedlings in a 7-ounce cup. So I'm actually looking at the root growth in the first 2 weeks.
Okay.
So I track that. Then they go to a solo cup, maybe. Sometimes they go to a 1 gallon. I try to up pot a minimum of 3 times, 4 times if I can. So each time, I'm not using micro highs. I generally use recharge. I like recharge when I dust my holes. And I constantly check them, and I try not, I'll if I make a decision early, it's amazing actually over time, and it's not always true. So I want to say that it's absolutely not always true. But if you track root growth from a 7-ounce to a 1 gallon to a 2 gallon to a 3 gallon, you'll find out that the ones that had the strongest root growth in the first couple weeks, they're the strongest plants, like throughout the whole cycle of the plant. Now, my guess is that's 80 to 90%, because there's always some that come on late and they're really great plants. So it's not a determining factor for me, but it's a piece of data.
To him now, I forgot.
So this plant And the reason I'm showing is just because we've talked about capfish. Macfish number 6 was the mom. We talked about Frosty McFish, which is a complementary breeding that I'm going to use to Miracle Grow. This is the mom. So this is from the 2022, 23, 24. I think this is the 2022 season, I think. And that plant's 12 feet tall, and every one of those colas is bigger than your arm.
Yeah, those are impressive colas.
Yeah. Are these seeded or not seeded?
Nope, we just grow in the plant. But so I use Costa Maine soil. I don't use any foliars. I keep the process really simple, and it gets rain or it gets watered, and that's about it. I do some IPM, but I'm not doing anything to accelerate the growth. But this plant, and just like the Mac, right? I mean, you don't get a ton of seeds, you get some different variations. I was joking around, the stuff that comes from Mac 1 is gems and junk, which I like because you can can the junk early,
Yeah.
and there's some gems in there. So, but when I talk about the breedings and the intent and the males to be used, this is the girl I got in 22, and it takes years, right? You got to grow out a couple to find the right one. Then I find the right one. It's like, okay, what's going to be complementary? What's going to go into this? Like I know that all the fish piss are going to have myrcene and caryophyllene in them, right? So if I want a complementary, I'm going to do something that's similar to that. I'm not necessarily going to hit it with a plant that's all piney, right? Because I'm not sure what that's going to produce. I know that if I take a myrcene and caryophyllene plant or genetics that are heavy in that, then I'm going to get a complementary, and I may be able to find something even a little better. So I'm always looking at the plants and figuring out how they can go together. And with this one plant, I did a complementary, which we just showed, the Frosty McFish, with a very uniform, it's really good weed. And then I showed the Capfish, which has got this bizarre thinking man's weed, and the albinos. So they both came from the same mom, right? I mean, or this mom was a key in both of those breedings, and the plants are going to be completely different. So you really can direct the plant the way you want it to go. Or you can try. Like I said, you're going to have some fails, but that's the fun part for me. I just wanted to show this because we were talking about all the moms in the other breedings.
I know we haven't scratched the surface with you, so I hope we can make some time. Like this is ultra long form over here. We're not looking for, like before you said, oh, I'm just going to tell you this quickly. We don't want you to tell us stuff quickly. We want the long form story, but, that just might mean that we have to schedule part 2. Also, I want to ask you if you would want to do our other show with Nick, which is called The Way We Grow. I know he would love to have you on because that one more focuses on the way you grow, and we can get into depth on that. But, we still have a little time, and I hope you'll accept my invitation to come back, as many times as it takes till we get your story out there.
The answer is yes, and thank you. And I'm the same as you. You start talking about weeds, you could talk about it forever.
Well,
So,
we probably don't have time to even get into it, but I still wanted to ask it just so you can start thinking about it, Bob. For the Mac 1, I've heard, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly. That's what happens when you read things, you don't really speak about it. But I've heard that it's a triploid, which means that it has like a third chromosome, and it's one of the unique traits of the Mac 1. But another thing about that is it makes it really hard to breed with. For some reason, it leaves you with a lot of immature seeds. And again, this is just something I've read about. So the fact that you've actually worked with this plant, it's very interesting to me to hear, from your experience firsthand, about how that plant reacts to, breeding projects.
So Mac 1, I've seen the triploid back and forth. I don't pay a ton of attention to it. because I know what the plant does and I know what it can do, right? So to me, the plant itself is important, but not off track. I I don't know that I've ever got more than 70 seeds off of a Mac 1. It's generally in the 25 to 50 range. And to give you and it's kind of strange. We just finished talking about that Frosty McFish. So nobody really tells you what they get for seeds because everybody wants to buy seeds that nobody else can get, right? So they don't talk about the different numbers. That Frosty McFish in a 4x4 tent at a 4-foot plant gave me 9,000 seeds. And I'm growing them right now. They're all growing. They're all German. They're all solid. 9,000 seeds. That same size plant, if it was a Mac 1, would be 50 seeds. And it's one of the reasons why you don't see a lot of breeding with the Mac 1 because it's more work. And you're not going to get a ton of stuff. Like that Mac Fish 6, I don't think there's any more seeds. I mean, most of the ones I did a Mac Red, which is around here. I never released it. It's around here, but it's the same thing. I think I've got, enough seeds to maybe go and find one more plant, but we grew them over 3 years and you end up basically with the Macs, you end up with one plant because you don't have that many to search through. But yeah, 100%. It's a very tough plant to get seeds out of. I didn't even get dead seeds. You just don't get them.
Okay. And is that a trait that you've noticed it's passed along to the offspring that it's produced?
No, because I used the Mac Fish. Gave me a ton of seeds, and then the Frosty Mac Fish is the plant that gave me 9,000 seeds. But the Mac's a nice strong plant, and it adds a whole bunch of frost. And the thing is, if you bring flavor into it, and I tried to bring the spice into it, and the fish piss brings this kind of umami flavor in. You bring flavor in, like talking to Gabby before about the male bringing structure and stuff like that without bringing something to the party would not be a great idea for me if it was the Mac 1. I think you bring something into the Mac 1 and you get something better out. But when you get stuff, you're going to get some junk. Like they're going to be squirrely, and everybody wants to try to save that squirrely plant because it could be the next chem dog, right? I've never found any success dealing with the squirrely plants coming out of the Mac. I've tried a couple, and from now it's I know which ones are going to turn. Well, I think I know which ones are going to turn out better, so I'll focus on them. But yeah, it's an interesting breeding plant. I gave it up. I mean, same. I would never filial generation it. So I did my breedings with it, and I passed it on to a couple people as it was passed to me. So I haven't had the Mac 1 in a couple of years.
Yeah. So we only have a couple of minutes left. So before we go, I wanted to see if there was anything you wanted to add. We've already discussed that you'll be back soon for part 2 and hopefully be doing the Way We Grow podcast. But is there anything you want to say before we go today?
No, I think you're doing a great job. I that's why I sent you the text. I've watched a couple of them. I watched with Marcus. I watched with Jodri. It's kind of fun, and honestly, if you look at your subscribers relative to your I don't know what you call them,
Reviews.
Reviews. People are watching. Nice high percentage. So that you've got a good group of people who are interested in the plant. And that's always a good place to be, right? I mean, we can only watch the Australian podcast, and we can only watch FCP, and we can only watch a couple of these so much, and you're out of material. So you have the ability and potential to bring new material, and you like the story format. I like what you're doing, so I congrats to you.
Like I said, I appreciate it. The love that we're getting on this podcast. It's unexpected, and so appreciated. Like I don't think there's anyone that couldn't use more positivity in their life, and it's been great. Like every day I send the Cosmic and Wolf a message saying, look at these comments and look at how many more views these last videos got. And like people ask, like, what are you doing? We're like, nothing. It's totally organic. Um, we don't promote it at all. We've been lucky to have really interesting guests join us right away. We've been lucky that somehow, can I ask, how did you find our podcast?
Honestly, I'm not sure.
Yeah, because like when I look at...
Actually, you know what? Mark Gallo.
Oh, right. Okay, because we interviewed Mark.
Right. I think Mark posted that he was coming on, and
And
then
you
I'm
saw
like,
that.
I mean, so there's a couple thousand people that follow him, so that's and
Okay, so
that's probably a good chunk right there,
yeah, and I mean, we did the video with Kevin Jodry, and he's just like,
Well, somebody's probably doing a search for his names, and Kevin's got a pretty big following.
yeah. I mean, like I said, we've been lucky to have good guests, and you're definitely included in that. Like I said, and I think the proof is in our text message. I agreed to have you on the podcast before I knew anything about you. And then I started talking to you, and I was like, holy fuck, this guy's pretty ridiculous. And with a great story. So, yeah. I mean...
And you know what? At the same time, what I like, if I'm giving away plants and somebody gets better at breeding, then someday I may use that plant to cross something else because I want it with the same parent. So the more people I can help, the better the genetics are going to be. And that's a benefit for everybody. So I truly enjoy it. I really do.
Earlier in the podcast, you said you're doing this because of, your
my ego.
But I don't really think that that's true.
It is kind of true.
I mean, I think that a bigger part of it is how much you love the plant. It's cool that it feeds your ego too. Like I said, when people thank me for doing the podcast and tell me how much they love me, it's feeding my ego a little bit. But I am still doing it because in the end, I love it. And I love having these conversations. So it can be both. You can feed your ego and you can love the plant. And it's clear that you love the plant. We even spoke about yesterday how if you had to choose to stop smoking or stop growing, you would choose to stop smoking because you just love growing and breeding the plant. And
well, honestly, it's OCD. What happens is OCD kicks in, and it just happened that when it kicked in on weed 10 years ago, it kind of never went away, and it's become primary. I did greyhounds for a bunch of years. I drag race motorcycles. Like if I get into it,
greyhounds? Did you breed them?
Yeah.
It's like becoming a very common thread that all of the great breeders that I'm meeting, that they bred dogs as well.
I mean, I got all the stud books. I used to study horse breeding. I mean, half of the thoroughbreds in the world come from like 5 horses, right? 5 Arabians. So, the breeding's fascinating. I love the genetics.
Well, we really loved talking to you, and I'm going to call you back immediately after the new year and try to fit you in right away because I said, I really want to release. I don't want people to feel like I'm teasing them and dragging them along and making them wait weeks for part 2. Again, I'm grateful for you, Bob. I'm grateful for you reaching out.
Yeah, Happy New Year, guys.
This episode of Gabbing with Gabby is brought to you by the Breeders Direct Seed Company. In my opinion, the Breeders Direct Seed Company is your premier source for clones and seeds, and they are the only place that you can get the Gabby Staten Island collection. So visit Breeders Direct for all your seed and clone needs.